Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have an exciting episode ahead, packed with valuable insights, so please stay with us until the end as we dive deep into the latest developments in generative AI. Let's get started. In our last deep dive, we really got into the weeds of the transformer architecture that powers basically all of modern AI. But today, we're taking that next logical step. We're moving from the how it works to the what if. What happens when these models get so good that they start talking back, writing poetry, and really blurring the lines of what we thought was a uniquely human ability? Today, we're going looking for the ghost in the machine.
So here's the game plan for how we're going to tackle this. We'll kick things off by digging into the deep philosophical roots of this whole question. Then we'll get right into the hard problem of consciousness itself. From there, we'll pivot to the real world and see how AI is playing out in creative industries. After that, we'll look at how we can even begin to test for these abilities, before we wrap up by looking at the big ethical questions on the horizon.
Okay, let's just dive right in. I want to start by framing this whole buzz around AI consciousness. You know, it feels like a very new 21st century problem that just sort of exploded onto the scene. But is it? Or are we just adding a new, very high-tech chapter to a book that people have been writing for centuries?
That's the perfect way to frame it. This conversation is anything but new. I mean, if you look at this timeline, you can see we're wrestling with a question that's been evolving for literally millennia. It really starts all the way back in ancient Greece with Plato's allegory of the cave, which honestly is a shockingly good metaphor for where we are now. He imagined these prisoners who could only see shadows on a wall, and they mistook those shadows for reality. It's such a powerful parallel to an AI that just processes data without any grounding in the real world. It can see the shadows perfectly, but it has no concept of the objects casting them. The debate just gets more and more refined from there.
And the real turning point was René Descartes. His famous statement, "I think, therefore I am," did more than just establish the mind as a certainty. It also created this deep, fundamental split. The non-physical mind over here, and the physical body, the machine, over there. This is the classic mind-body problem, and it begs the question we're still asking. Can a machine, which is just a body of circuits and code, ever truly have a mind? This question has been debated by philosophers and computer scientists like Turing and Searle for decades. And now, large language models are forcing every single one of us to confront it as a daily reality.
That's a great historical flyover. So Descartes really set up this core conflict for us, mind versus matter. So let's get right to the heart of it. What is that fundamental gap between a machine that can process information with incredible, almost unbelievable sophistication, and a machine that actually has a subjective first-person experience of the world? Well, the crucial distinction, which was really laid out by the philosopher Ned Block, is the difference between functional and phenomenal consciousness. Functional consciousness is all about the mechanics. It's processing data, integrating information, controlling behavior based on that data. And let's be clear, today's AI systems are absolute masters of this. But phenomenal consciousness, that's a completely different beast. It's the subjective, qualitative texture of experience itself. It's the what it is likeness of being you. It's not just about identifying the wavelength of red light, it's the actual internal experience of seeing the color red.
Exactly, and this brings us right to what David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. See, it's relatively easy to explain how a system functions, how it does what it does. But it is incredibly hard, maybe impossible, to explain why all that processing should feel like anything at all from the inside. This is where that wild thought experiment of the philosophical zombie comes in. Imagine a being that is functionally identical to a human in every single way. It talks, it laughs at your jokes, it reacts perfectly, but inside it's all dark. There's no subjective experience. From the outside, we can never, ever prove it wasn't conscious. And that is the core challenge with AI. An LLM can write a heartbreakingly beautiful poem about sadness, perfectly modeling all the language we associate with that emotion, but without actually feeling even a flicker of it. The philosopher John Searle really nailed this gap with his famous Chinese room argument. It's a great analogy. Imagine you're locked in a room and you don't speak a single word of Chinese. People outside are sliding questions written in Chinese under the door. But you have a massive rulebook written in English that tells you if you see this combination of symbols, write down that combination of symbols. You just follow the rules, pass the answers back out, and from the outside, it looks like you're having a fluent, intelligent conversation in Chinese. But do you understand a word of it? Not at all. You're just manipulating symbols. You're managing the syntax. You have zero grasp of the meaning, the semantics.
And Searle's point was that this is exactly what an AI does. No matter how complex that rulebook gets, symbol manipulation alone can never become genuine understanding. Wow, that's such a powerful and, frankly, persistent argument against consciousness from pure computation. So, okay, let's bring this back down to earth. While the philosophers debate true consciousness, the functional capabilities of these models are just exploding. And this has created a huge, often panicked debate in creative fields like writing, art, and translation. So let's pivot to the practical side of this. Is AI a doomsday weapon for creative professionals, or is it just the next really powerful tool in their toolkit?
That is the billion-dollar question right now, and I think the answer is overwhelmingly that it's a tool. Mark Williams from the New Publishing Standard puts it very bluntly here. He argues that this whole narrative of AI destroying creative jobs is a false binary. It presents this ridiculous choice between creative jobs becoming obsolete or everyone just retreating to old-fashioned methods. He basically calls it doomsayer nonsense, and the core of his argument is that this view just fundamentally misunderstands both what the technology can do and the actual nature of creative work itself.
This contrast between the doomsayer and the collaborator view is really the critical thing to understand. The doomsayer view sees AI as a replacement, something that's going to make anyone who isn't a top-tier genius totally obsolete. But the collaborator view, which Williams and many others advocate for, is so much more nuanced. The argument is that AI doesn't replace human judgment, it frees us up to use our judgment at a much higher level. So an average creator isn't doomed, they are augmented. The technology can handle the mechanical, repetitive, time-consuming parts of the job, which allows the human to focus on nuance, cultural context, authorial vision, the stuff that really matters. The baseline of professional output doesn't collapse, it actually shifts upward for everyone. And we have some fantastic and, frankly, hilarious real-world examples of why this human oversight is still absolutely indispensable. There's this one great anecdote where an AI was asked to translate a document called the Riga Manifesto into Slovenian. The output was a perfectly fine translation except for one tiny, glaring error. The title came out as what translates back to the burping manifesto. In another case, the Slovenian slang for a monthly bus pass, which sounds like monthly period, was literally translated, creating some very confusing implications for public transport. These examples are funny, but they brilliantly illustrate where AI just flops flat. It can handle the syntax, but it completely lacks the deep cultural, contextual, and common sense understanding, the wisdom that only a human can provide. Turns out, the ghost in the machine burps.
The burping manifesto. I am never going to forget that. Okay, so AI is a powerful but clearly flawed collaborator. This brings us to a really important question: measurement. If these models are getting so good at mimicking human conversation, how do we even test them anymore? Is Alan Turing's classic test, where a human has to distinguish between a person and a machine, is that now obsolete?
It's not obsolete, but it absolutely needs an upgrade. The latest research is showing that the problem isn't the test itself, but how we've been running it. So researchers compared two different setups. The first is the simple test, which is what most of us think of. You chat with one unknown entity, and then you guess if it's a human or an AI. But the second setup is what they call the enhanced test. Here, the tester interacts with two entities at the same time in a dual chat window. One is a real human, and the other is an AI. This ability to make a direct, real-time comparison turns out to be a complete game changer.
And the results from this study are just striking. Let's look at this table for a second. In the simple test, with no special prompting, people could identify the AI about 68% of the time. Not bad. But in the enhanced dual chat test, that number jumps to over 93%. People were so much better at spotting the AI when they had a human baseline right there to compare it to. But the difference gets even more dramatic when you use prompt engineering to try and make the AI act more human-like.
And this bar chart right here shows the most critical finding of the whole study. When the AI was specifically prompted to use slang, to make typos, to act more casual and human, people's accuracy in that simple single chat test just plummeted to under 44%. They were easily fooled. But in the enhanced dual chat test, their accuracy was still way up there at nearly 71%. What this proves is that the environment of the test is everything. If you give them the right context and a direct point of comparison, humans are still very, very good at telling who is who. The Turing test isn't dead. We just needed to make it more robust.
That's a really critical insight. It's not just about what the AI can do on its own, but how we design the entire interaction. So let's move into our final section. As these systems become ever more convincing, ever more integrated into our daily lives, what are the profound ethical questions that we need to start asking, like, right now?
The ethical landscape is just vast and incredibly complex. And this is no longer the domain of science fiction. We are facing some really urgent questions. I mean, if an AI were to actually achieve some form of consciousness, what is its moral status? Does it deserve rights, protections? Could it be granted legal personhood, making it responsible for its own actions? But a much more immediate risk is just plain old anthropomorphism, our very human tendency to project feelings and intentions onto systems that are just sophisticated mimics. And of course, this all presents a deep challenge to the idea of human exceptionalism and the very morality of creating potentially sentient beings just for our own purposes. These are becoming practical concerns for engineers and lawmakers, not just philosophers.
This has been an incredibly rich discussion, taking us all the way from ancient philosophy to modern-day computer labs. To help us wrap things up, could you just summarize the most critical takeaways from our conversation today?
Absolutely. I think if you're going to remember anything, it's these 5 points. First, this debate over machine consciousness isn't new. It's a centuries-old philosophical question that technology has finally made real and pressing. Second, we have to always distinguish between an AI's functional ability to process stuff and the potential for any true, subjective, phenomenal experience. That gap is still vast. Third, in the real world, especially in creative fields, AI is a powerful collaborator that augments human talent, not a usurper that replaces it. Fourth, how we test these things is critical. Robust, comparative environments like an enhanced Turing test are essential to see their real limitations. And finally, and maybe most importantly, this whole journey is forcing us to confront fundamental questions about ourselves, about rights, about identity, and about what it really means to be human in the first place.
A perfect summary. Which really leaves us with this final, thought-provoking question for everyone watching. As AI continues to evolve, will we become its creator, its partner, or its custodian? Be sure to tune in for our next deep dive, where we'll be exploring the AI Artist Studio, from pixels to photorealism. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like, and share, and don't forget to hit the bell for more from Tech AI and beyond.